Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I said good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, yeah. Just making sure you're waking up. If we can all just take our seats, we'll get started. I think we can shut that back door. Great. Okay, so thanks again for joining us. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Christopher Ludwig, the editor of Automotive Logistics magazines. And welcome to our first breakout session, focusing this one on finished vehicle capacity. So obviously this is a topic that we cover in some way, shape, or form every year, and I think this year it has a particular flavor, a particular color, maybe snow would be the closest to it. I think unless you started in the industry like a week or two ago, you probably already know a lot of the challenges that were faced for the better part of this year following the winter that we had and some of the capacity bottlenecks that followed. Obviously there's other issues like Mexico growth and lots of questions that come up. I don't need to spend too much time rehashing that, except perhaps to say that this session, I think we're looking to focus more on contingency planning, on how to avoid some of the issues we've had, on collaboration between modes. It's not a question of pulling off of rail onto road or wholesale switching to short sea or whatever it is. It's really looking at ways that we can have the right mix of capacity, the right mix of modes, and perhaps, as I mentioned, most importantly, how those modes can work together. I think that's something that we learned from this past year that perhaps the industry could do better. I'm really proud to get a chance to lead this panel because I think we've put together a great mix of speakers and panelists for you representing both car makers, road, and rail. I'll introduce them first before we move into our presentations. First up, we'll have Brian Mason, who's the National Manager, Strategic Planning and Communications at Toyota Logistics Services. I should point out that the program notes are a little inaccurate. This is Brian's 30th year, he just reminded me, with Toyota, not his 28th, so congratulations there. He obviously started when he was about 7 years old or something. So, we also have Dave Fleenor, who's currently Assistant Vice President of Automotive at BNSF. Dave's had a variety of roles in logistics and road carriers as well as rail, in automotive, intermodal, and in industrial side. So great to have Dave with us and to hear the rail perspective. Alex Meza, Chief Commercial Officer of Jack Cooper, which is of course the largest coal haulier in North America. And Alex has lots of experience, again, across multiple modes. And then joining us on the panel without a presentation, but also here for the Q&A, is Nate Lawson, who's Manager of Vehicle Purchasing and Systems at General Motors. So again, a great mix. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A after our presentations, but let's get started on that and invite Brian up to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. When I put together a presentation, like a lot of us, I end up doing a lot of work at home. And I was trying to think of a theme for this. And my daughter, who's 9 years old, came in and was asking what I was doing. And so she helped me with the theme. And I kind of explained we're kind of trying to think about how we can move vehicles when the weather gets bad and capacity runs short. So her idea was Frozen, a transportation story. Because it snowed, and it snowed, and it snowed. And this is what I get for letting my 9-year-old help me with my presentation. Olaf, what are you doing? No, we don't have time to build a snowman, Olaf. Well, we have to figure out how we're going to move all these cars during the snow, so, well, unless you can make all this snow disappear, because what we're told is when the snow disappears, everything will get better. We've all heard that story, right? So moving on, we had a really bad winter last year, and there were a lot of other issues impacting us as well, but very long winter. Train lengths were cut by 50% due to the temperature. Cycle times were impacted. Bi-level rail cars, 65% under load. The OEM ground stock went up to, I think, a record level of 205,000 vehicles. And at the same time, the market and the OEMs basically did both a turn and a climb in altitude, because we shifted from tri-level vehicles to bi-level vehicles in a pretty big way for trucks and SUVs. And at the same time, the total market volume was going up, back up toward a record SAAR. So the combination there really had an impact on our capacity. We all got very familiar with this chart. This is a TTX chart, and we thank TTX for publishing it every day. And I think this year was marked with a lot of executives at very senior levels at OEMs got to see this chart that never had seen it before. And all of a sudden, we had group vice presidents and senior vice presidents who were watching this chart every day and very, very focused on what it meant to us. For TLS, for Total Logistics Services, the things that we did was, number one, made a commitment. We're going to work with the industry. This is not a problem we're going to solve ourselves. So we need to work with industry. We worked with Alice. We worked with our rail carriers and partnered with them to implement improved forecasting. I've talked to a couple of carriers, and from an OEM's perspective, the number one thing that we can do to help our rail carriers help us is provide a more accurate forecast. And not just 2 weeks, but 2 years. And that's one of the areas we really got caught short last winter when we took that sudden diversion over to the bi-level vehicles. And we hold daily operations conference calls with all of our TLS stakeholders, the people at the plants. We include rail. We include all the transportation people in that on a daily basis. So everybody is aware of what's going on. Information can really help in these situations. We provided TLS on-site support. Our plants were overwhelmed. And it was something where they just had so many cars. We had them parked on test tracks. We had them parked in employee parking lots. We had them parked off-site. So they were just overwhelmed by this. So we actually sent resources. I think John Daly almost became a Canadian citizen. He spent so much time in Canada this last year, but they really do appreciate the help. And we actively deployed both short-term and long-term alternative shipping options. We moved to truck in a lot of situations. And as Christopher said, I want to be very careful and say I'm not advocating wholesale taking a whole bunch of volume off rail and moving it to truck. What we are saying is be prepared if you do have weather situations, if you do have other industries like grain or coal or other things like that impacting rail, you need to be prepared for it. So that's kind of our focus is preparation. This is our network. We show our 5 ports on the outside where we used to bring in all of the vehicles because we were an import company. But now we have kind of this swath of plants all the way down the center of the country. And what that provides us is a kind of a unique opportunity that is starting to emerge and that we saw almost by accident this year, but it's something we wanted to share. So we'll focus in on this part of the country. And we've got our 4 plants, TMMK in Georgetown, where we make Camry, TMMI Princeton, where the Highlander is built, TMMTX in San Antonio, where Tundra and Tacoma is built, and TMMS Tupelo, where Corolla is built. And what we notice is this is kind of our traditional truck, usually somewhere in the 100 to 200 mile radius. And if you look at these circles, you don't see too much overlap, and so there's not a lot of opportunity for backhaul. If a truck leaves Princeton or TMMK, delivers kind of on the outside of that boundary, it's really just as fast to go back empty to the plant and pick up another load as it is to go to another plant. But as we expand that out, all of a sudden we start to see some backload opportunities start to emerge. We've got some overlaps between those 3 plants. And so suddenly you start to see just a little bit of potential emerge in terms of backhaul. When you go way out, 500 plus miles, all of a sudden now you're seeing substantial backhaul opportunities from all 4 of those plant locations. Now, from a financial standpoint, rail may still be more economically viable. But if you can't get rail, you can at least, as a secondary, start moving toward truck with backhaul. And what we've found is if we can partner with our trucking companies to help them identify backhaul that we can provide, that will give us much more competitive rates, and that's more likely to get us allocated those valuable truck resources. So kind of the lessons learned here is, in a crisis, consider extending your truck away route 50 to 100 miles. Just 50 to 100 miles could really potentially create some backhaul opportunities. Because the other thing you have to think about in that geographic area is you've also got railheads interspersed through there as well, where they can also pick up vehicles and deliver them. So you've got a lot more opportunities for backhaul if you just kind of nudge that circle out a little bit. And last but not least, you can't have too many friends in a crisis. I wanted to say thanks to all the trucking companies, all the highway transportation carriers that really kind of jumped in and saved us and helped us move our volume this year. We really appreciated that. And we really appreciate all the hardworking railroads as well. I know everybody was working hard to try to move our vehicles and everybody else's vehicles. Kind of the next area that we looked at is kind of proactive mitigation. Carefully review your parking capacity, your storage capacity. Toyota is a fairly lean company. It's kind of what we're built on. And typically at most of our plant locations, we will have 3 to 4 days of capacity. So that means 3 or 4 days of production is what we can store. So the expectation is the vehicle's only going to be on the property for less than 3 or 4 days. Last winter, we stayed for a lot longer, than that. And so, if you start 4-packing, 6-packing, 8-packing, at some point we even went off-site. We had lease space. We stored at railheads. We moved vehicles everywhere. But right now is really a good time, and that's one of the things we did at Toyota was really looked intently at all of our storage capacity at all of our North American plants. And we identified 1 or 2 that were really just not enough for an emergency. So we actually owned physical property there. It just wasn't improved. We didn't have paving on it. So we actually took some of that property this year, and we're in the process of paving that. So we're going to extend that out so we have at least 5 days of production storage capacity at every location. And that's just as a safety factor, kind of a shock absorber to anything that goes on. Proactive mitigation, establish an escalation process and do it early, do it now. And the idea is that's an escalation process with your carriers, both truck carriers, rail carriers, and within your own organizations. Have that escalation process built in so that when a CEO or a vice president gets a call from my vice president, they know that isn't just a casual call. That's an escalation call to a process they're familiar with already. And the same thing internally, let your vice presidents, senior vice presidents in your sales organizations know that if we have certain designations of crisis level, that's going to mean potentially your sales are going to be impacted. Your supply is going to be impacted. I think the biggest thing we were very proud of this year is that we did not close a plant. We came very close, but we did not close a plant. And that's kind of the holy grail for us. We never want to constrain production because we don't have a place to put the cars or we can't move them. We also took the time to build some more tracking tools. I know this looks like a lot. What the black line on the very top is our total on-site and off-site capacity. So as you can see, the red line is basically, the red dotted line is basically the yard capacity. That's the normal yard capacity. The black dotted line is if we kind of restructure that parking, do 4-packs, 6-packs, 8-packs, we can squeeze a little bit more on there. So we go up from, say, 5,500 to 7,000. And then that last jump is if we go off-site. And this gives us really good visibility. We have one of these for each plant, and we monitor and update this every day. And the idea is this gives us really good visibility as to a problem that's building. The other area I'll focus in on is way down on the bottom. It's kind of hard to see, so I blow it up. The blue is the daily plant production for a week. The reds and the greens are, the green is when we're shipping more vehicles than the plant is producing. The red is when we're not shipping, actually the plant is building more vehicles than we were able to ship. And so you can see, this is somewhat sample data, but it's reflective of last year. You know, when you really look at it, when you see all that red and not very many greens, that's how you get that big production spike build up. The light blue line is what we call, it's a predictive forecast. And we can change the wheelbase on that forecast however we want. So it can be based on the last week, the last 2 weeks, the last month, depending on the volatility. What we don't want to do is have a really long wheelbase on our forecast if we've got a very volatile environment. We want it to be very reflective. But if you make that wheelbase too short and only are going off, say, last 5 days of production, you could kind of overcorrect, and in some cases it could, you know, predict a disaster when there probably won't be one. But that's something we can adjust as we see the volatility of the inventory moving up and down. And then the red line is the vendor's kind of plan forecast that we get from whatever transportation vendors are supporting that particular location. So it's a lot of data in one chart, but it's something where it's a very valuable tool, and once you learn how to use it and learn how to read it, it's something you can look at it in about a minute. You can realize, today's a good day, I can go to lunch today, I can probably leave reasonably on time, or this day's really gonna be bad and I'm probably better call my wife and say I'm gonna be late. So, we mentioned industry support. We can't advocate enough support for the industry groups, and I try to put everybody up here. If I missed your industry group, send me your logo, I'll put you up next time. And it's really important. And I also put automotive logistics and finished vehicle logistics up here because in itself, it's an industry group. It's an opportunity for, you know, us to collectively get together and talk and share ideas and hear what other people are doing. And you know, the problem we had last winter was not a problem any of us were going to fix alone. It takes all of us kind of working together. So really encourage that. Our long-term plan, continue to work closely with our rail carriers. That's our #1 priority. By improving our forecasts, enhancing our communications, we need to help them deliver better service to us. We bear part of that responsibility. And implement a higher percentage of long-term transportation to mitigate potential rail constraints. And then shift to longer-term contracts and to provide us with really a little bit more competitive rates and provide incentives for the trucking companies to go out and invest in new trucks, to invest in new drivers. You know, that driver shortage is real. We want people, you know, to do their best and try to bring the best and the brightest people into that, and continue working with industry groups to promote positive change. And let's all hope for a very mild winter this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. I think that was a great presentation. You know, what's the expression? Never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think, you know, showed a lot of what Toyota has learned, what's doing, what they're planning now before the snow starts, before the winter comes. I'm sure other companies have similar stories, but I think it's a great case study fine presentation. Maybe not a bestseller in terms of a children's book. I'm not sure if that chart is really going to play well with other 9-year-old kids and stuff. But thanks so much for that, and thank you also for the plug for automotive logistics and finished vehicle logistics. The check's in the mail on that one, so appreciate that. Our next speaker is from BNSF. It's funny, after our California conference in May, Dave came up to me and he mentioned quite fairly that maybe the railways didn't have enough opportunity to speak at that event, and in this, with us group, with Louis or me, you have to be careful what you wish for sometimes. So we put him right to work on this one. So Dave Fleenor.
All right, good morning, everybody. I guess first, thank you for giving me the opportunity, since, like Christopher mentioned, we didn't get the chance to tell our story at the last meeting, and we were a fairly popular topic of many folks' presentation. I'm relatively new to the industry, and just to give you a little bit of background, I owe my railroad career to my father. He is a foamer, and is that term familiar to many of you out there? A foamer is a person who, when they see a train moving or still, gets so excited they start foaming at the mouth. So that's my background. Okay, at the last conference, like we mentioned, lots of discussion about rail. And as a railroad, we really don't like to make the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And it's not necessarily a very good thing, and we did in the last year, and so that's a place we don't want to be. So again, we didn't have a chance to tell our story, but credit to Louis and Christopher, they gave us a chance, so here I am. Most of you are familiar with what we do, but last night at the cocktail reception, I was talking to a few folks, and one of them looked at me and goes, okay, well, what does BNSF do? So I felt it was appropriate to give you a brief overview, 4 slides, that's all. So when we look at the industry, now this is an industry-specific slide, we believe it takes a village to move those vehicles from plant to consumer. It takes rail, it takes truck, it takes vessels. And so when you look at this, rail, we're the backbone, and when the backbone is working well, you don't notice it. But when pain starts shooting down your leg like it did last fall, you start paying real serious attention to us. This is a unique thing about the industry. We spend a lot of money. 18% on average of every revenue dollar goes back into the industry as capital. And when you think about our investments, automotive manufacturers spend billions on plants, we spend billions on right-of-way, but if a piece of track is in the wrong part of the country, it ends up being those rails to trails and people start biking on it. So it's really important that we get it right, and it takes a while to build. One thing I always get, and I even got this question this morning, is why don't you operate the way those European railroads operate? And so when you look at one of probably the biggest things, you think about us, we spend about 18% of every revenue dollar as capital. Do you know what the railroads in Britain, for example, spend on in terms of revenue dollars they put back into their physical plant? That would be 0, because they lose significant dollars. Their revenue last year was about $14 billion. Their expenses were 20, and the government kicked in $8 billion for capital. So it's a very different business model. So keep that in mind when you try to compare and contrast this to what goes on in Europe. Okay, this is 2 slides on BNSF. In terms of units, we are the largest railroad in North America. Evenly balanced, 4 basic business areas. And the one thing, I think the 2 takeaways up there is, number 1, 4% growth last year. And crude, which got a lot of topics and a lot of conversation, is only 5% of our overall portfolio. If you think about one way to look at that 4% growth, if it was evenly spread over our entire network, 12 months out of the year over everything, it'd be about 1 additional train running on our network every 600 miles. So that in itself is not a daunting task to handle that kind of volume. Customers have seen this one a lot, which is our capital. And the thing here that I want to draw your attention to was, think about it, 4% growth last year, 25% growth in capital. And so why is that? It's because we did not perform to the expectations of our customers last year. And so we are committed to restoring our franchise and our capability to the levels that folks have come to expect from us. And one last piece here that I want to highlight, automotive is a critical piece of our business, even though you saw it was only 2% of our total volume. In 3 years, between 2013 and next year, we will have spent more than $600 million on automotive-specific facilities and equipment. So that's a big number. All right, last winter was really tough. The whole industry saw velocity declines, obviously lots of vehicles on the ground. We are sorry for the pain that we put our customers through. We know we made your life rough, and we know we also kept Steve Tripp up at night, and that's something we don't want to do. Okay, again, drawing back to the growth, crude has grown significantly, and you can see there it's up 158% since 2009, but automotive is up 86% at the same time frame. So all commodities are growing, and the demand for freight transportation continues to accelerate. And if you think back to that 4% growth equals one train every 600 miles, that would be something that any of us could handle. Unfortunately, though, the growth was not only not spread out evenly, it was concentrated in time and in place. And there's 3 major commodities that led to this. Number 1 was grain. 2012 was a pretty bad harvest up in the Dakotas and Minnesota. 2013 was a record. And unfortunately for the farmers, the prices were also near all-time highs. So they needed to move their product quickly. And so we got a huge surge in the third and fourth quarter of 2013. Crude also grew significantly coming out of North Dakota in particular. We saw a 27% increase in unit trains originate in a 1-month time period. And why did that happen is because the spreads for crude between where they produced it and where they sold it was huge. And here's one thing as we keep in mind, and I know everybody's got different positions on fracking, and I live in Texas, and if you look at a Google Earth of Texas, it is covered with drilling pads. But this year, in 2013, we produced 84% of the crude oil consumed in the U.S. Think back a decade or more ago, it was only 25%. So we are well on the path to becoming energy independent in North America, and that is a big deal for us, and it is a big deal for us in the world political environment as well. The last piece of business that surged was coal, and we haul huge amounts of coal, us and the UP out of Wyoming. And what we had last year was a very hot summer, and obviously we talked about the cold winter, so the increase for electricity demand surged. On top of that, back in 2011, the price for natural gas was $2 per million BTUs. In 2 years, that price tripled. So all those utilities that converted and started burning more natural gas to generate electricity went back. And so we saw a big increase in the demand for coal. Now, that in and of itself shouldn't cause us a lot of issues, particularly in automotive, because coal operates on what we call our coal route, coming out of Wyoming, going down through Kansas City and then to eastern gateways. But that is also our relief valve. If you look at our network, we've got 3 routes to the Pacific Northwest, and the coal route is one of the ones that we use significantly to when we get busy or full or we're doing maintenance projects. Well, because of this increase in coal, that route wasn't available to us, so we had to go, many of my customers already know this, but we run automobiles now via Barstow, California that go to the Pacific Northwest, so that is a long way to get there. So this was an interesting number. If you look at 2013, 20% of the entire industry growth originated in North Dakota. And you couple that with a normal year, it probably would have been difficult to handle. But instead, as we all know, we had a really difficult year. And I'll do a quick graphic on the impact of cold on us. And when it gets down to minus 15, minus 20 degrees in North Dakota, what happens is our train size is limited because in order to operate the air brakes, we need to push air through the system. And if you run a 7,000-foot train, you can't do that when the temperature is minus 20 degrees. So therefore, what we end up with is, this is a normal situation. And again, the thing that remember when you look at our railroad, up in North Dakota, it is single track. So how many of you drive on roads that only have one lane? Probably not many of you. And when you do run across those, like when a bridge is out, think of the backups that occur. Well, that's our normal operating environment in North Dakota, is single track with sidings where we park trains. So then what happened in the winter when we had to operate twice as many trains, it took away all of our ability to operate and to be flexible. So it really got tough on us. So this is probably the question I get most often is, what are we looking like going into 14, winter 14 into 15 and beyond? And I guess the answer to that is, number one, our term is we are oversourcing the railroad right now. Through the first half of the year, we've seen a little less than 3% volume growth on BNSF. We're spending 25% more capital, 10% more locomotives, and we will hire over 6,000 people to operate. And those folks and those locomotives are focused on the areas of our network that are under the most strain. And so again, back to that graphic on how's this going to make life better. If you think about our single track railroad, you can see that, when we got congested with the additional volume, when you go to double track, you're running, it's like a 2-lane road. And obviously, it's a much better environment and we can handle a lot more capacity. This year, we added 160 miles of double track, which is a big number up in North Dakota. And you will see us add significantly more double track in the 2015 capital plan that will be coming out. This is a chart that the AAR compiles statistics from all of the Class 1s, and you can see the decline in velocity across the industry. And you can also tell, it's kind of hard maybe to see in the chart, but that orange line is us. We started before everybody else, and why is that? That goes back to that volume surge of grain, crude, and coal in the third quarter last year. So, and then when you piled on winter, it definitely caused us issues. But what we like to point out is we have seen improvement since the bottom in February. And so we expect those improvements to continue on an incremental basis as we add additional capacity and bring on more crews and locomotives. The other thing that I want to point out too that also came up at the last conference was, we're favoring one single commodity over another. And I'll give you some numbers, and these are August over August numbers. Automotive velocity on the BNSF is down 14% year over year. Coal is down 17%, grain is down 22%, and crude oil is down 24% year over year. So if anybody would be screaming about getting preferential treatment, it wouldn't be the crude guys. I'll mention a couple things here that we're doing, again, in addition to the overall additions to our capacity. One is our new facility in Big Lift. We got skiers out there. You guys know how many skiers go to Colorado for ski season each year? Any guesses? No. It's about 15 million a year. And as a result, there needs to be a lot of vehicles, rental vehicles in Colorado. So they start pushing cars in October and November so that people go out there and they can have an SUV to rent instead of a subcompact. Well, our previous facility had half the capacity, and it was a source of congestion for us. So we, this June, opened up our brand new facility at Big Lift, Colorado. We can take full trains in. We have a lot of capacity for parking, and we also have the ability to expand it significantly. So 2014 will definitely be better as a result of that. The next one is Kansas City. Back in July of 2013, the IHB gave us 2 weeks notice and said, you know what, we're going to reduce the amount of blocks we make for the Western railroads, which is a significant problem for us. We need those separations in order to efficiently deliver the vehicles to the various markets that we go to. So that pushed that work from Chicago, and Chicago's where around 30% of all loads go through Chicago. So not only do we switch them in Chicago, but now we have to switch them west of there. So we've spent $35 million at Kansas City to build this switching facility that will come online in the next month. This will dramatically improve our service out of the southeast and to the southwest. So again, we're very confident that this will improve the velocity to our customers on those routes. And then finally, equipment's expensive, and Brian's point earlier about forecasts are critical. We had tri-levels in storage in 2012. We overbuilt as an industry because of the demand for bi-levels exceeded the forecast. We overbuilt tri-levels in 2013. But the point here is that we will have added 3,300 cars in 3 years, which is the single largest investment of any of the Class 1 railroads. So we are committed to having better car supply in 2014 and beyond. The last thing is, I think all of us were caught a little flat-footed in the third quarter. I don't think any of us railroads were forecasting significant velocity declines. And so I think all of our customers were caught unawares as well. So one of the things we are starting, our first one will be October 1st, is a monthly conference call with our leadership from our operating team with all of our customers. The idea is to focus on hot spots, maintenance projects, and give folks an idea of what to expect in the very real-time, near future of service from the BNSF, and then obviously have question and answer available to our customers. So we firmly believe in transparency with our customers, so that's how we're going to implement that starting in the very near future. So finally, again, I thank you folks for your business. I thank you for your attention today. And I can assure you that BNSF and the entire railroad industry is committed to automotive and is committed to restoring our service levels to where you've come to expect from us. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Glad that Dave had the chance to tell his story. As you can see, it is a very complex one, a lot of factors at play, but I think maybe the real message there is a lot about what's being done, a lot of investment, a lot of focus on improvements from North Dakota to other facilities, very specific to automotive as well. So hopefully that's encouraging, and that combined with hopefully a milder winter will hopefully keep us where we need to be. Switching modes now, our next speaker is Alex Meza from a small family-owned company you might have heard of, Jack Cooper.
Good morning. It's an honor and privilege to speak to you today. We prepared a couple of slides to go through, but as Christopher was saying, I'll spend 30 seconds on just who Jack Cooper is. As I know, this is a global conference, and we're more of a North American focused carrier. We have derived from the acquisition of Allied that we closed in December of 2013. We now have about 2,500 rigs all over the road with some idle capacity as well. We have over 4,000 employees, right now of the Jack Cooper family, and we're located in about 80 locations throughout Canada, Mexico, and North America. So, again, the idea to speak with you today, it's on behalf of sort of the perspective of the car hauling industry in North America. I didn't recognize the Zoe strategy, which I'm sure if you've seen Mike Riggs speak, he uses in all of his presentations. So this one's the right one, thank God. So again, just mention that, and it seems like weather has been on everyone's mind, right? It's no secret here that 2014 was an awful winter. Especially for me coming from Mexico and living up in Atlanta. It was certainly quite a rude awakening to see 2 inches of snow wreak havoc in a major metropolitan area. But so trying to understand what's coming, right? So the first thing we do is Google the Farmer's Almanac, right? So, and this is the header. So ask the winter outlook for 2015 per the Farmer's Almanac is as cold, maybe colder, and more precipitation. So it's actually a pretty cool website. You can go and look at by zip code, almost county, what they expect. So not very encouraging news for logistics. So then we start getting into a little bit of the detail of how they calculate that prediction. And believe me, I'm not going to spend too much time about how they do this, but they kind of throw into the middle of their forecast, El Nino, for those who remember what El Nino is. I'm certainly not the technical person to speak to what it does, but I know it's a bad thing, right? So they're saying, so El Nino plus polar vortex, what can happen? Our take is Sharknado. So luckily, no sharks in Michigan, and Brian can see that my kids are definitely in a different age range than Frozen. But certainly weather is an issue. But to us, it's really not the main issue, right? I mean, if we really start looking at what the industry is doing, you see that in 2014 we're pegged to do about 16.5 million units in production, right? And if you go back and you look at the production levels back in 2000, I mean they're about right there, right? On top of that, our studies show that back in early 2000, there's about 3,000 to 4,000 additional rigs in the system, right? So now you bake into that consideration the fact that Mexico is becoming more relevant in terms of production, especially for the U.S. bound. Canada is decreasing their production. So it's a different network today than it was back in 2000 with less trucks, right? So, of course, weather will happen, and there will be situations where all we can do is plan for it. But to me, it's an issue about trying to use whatever existing assets we have today in the most efficient way. So, with that in mind, we sort of have 3 ideas that we'd like to talk to you about. Some of them are kind of similar to what Brian presented, so lucky for us. And the first one, again, this is not a new slide. If you all seen Mike Riggs present in all these forums, that he's championing this event. And not to get into too much of the detail, but essentially, because of regulations, we've lost, or the car hauling industry has lost the capability to load about 1 unit in total. And our idea, or our proposal, is to try to regain that 1 unit of load factor. And if you think about it, in a load factor of average 8, increasing 1 more unit, it's about 12–13% capacity increase, right? So, this is not free capacity, because you actually have to do, some modifications, some investment to the actual rigs to be able to load this. And the specifics of that is, moving our weight limitations from 80,000 to 88,000, so by 10%, and moving from 75 feet in length to 80 feet in length with a 2-foot overhang. We think we're not asking for that much. We just got this, the picture of this rig. This is in China. I've never seen a tri-level rig before. And this is about 120 feet of load factor, for those who are in the industry. So we're certainly not going there, although, certainly capacity balance would be very different if the 14,000 car haulers that we have today had a capacity of 24, right? So, and the last piece on that is, we understand there's some concerns in terms of what the added weight would do to the road infrastructure. We've done sort of our due diligence on it, and on 3.5 million trucks on the road, we think that if you just limit it to the car hauling sector, you're talking about less than 0.4, 0.3% of the overall capacity out there traveling on the road. So therefore, the impact we believe to be, not there or negligible, if anything, right? So again, this is one idea that to us, adds 12, 13% capacity to the market. The second idea, it's sort of similar to what Brian is saying. We understand that it is a ever-developing network, and there will be weather, there will be circumstances, quality holds, or whatever that cause networks to constrain, right? To congest. There are certain points within the network that show a lot more stress than others. So. One of our thoughts is if OEMs can think of, setting aside some escape or release valve volume that they would, that we could, provide some efficient network analyses to put our trucks in those strategic markets that, that maybe prior to that were not truck served. It could mean for the cases where winter becomes an issue, a lot easier to flex up capacity if you're already operating in certain key strategic markets. And, as our transport folks say, bring the cavalry in, add another 100 trucks. It's a lot easier to do it if you're already serving, some of those, otherwise served markets. And the last one is, it's a little bit of a wild thought out there, or maybe not so much, but when we start analyzing sort of the complementarities of the logistics or supply chains, we see that depending on the timing of who bids what, there are a lot of natural routes between OEMs, and at certain points you get into a position where, well, I would love to be a lot more efficient in this lane, but that would mean I would have to win this other lane, with this other manufacturer, right? So, our thought, and believe me, it's controversial enough internally to, to sit 2 or 3 OEMs together, because if they have, purchasing power today, the thought is, well, you put 3 together, it's going to be impossible to really get anything good out of it. But our take is, it shouldn't be that way. We should, look at the efficiencies from a network analysis standpoint, and at the end of the day, one improvement on one loaded mile for us, it should be shared with the OEMs and with the truckers, so that at the end we have the capability to reinvest in our fleets and move on and have hopefully a bulletproof supply chain. So. Again, in conclusion, for us, it's all about, making more efficient use of our assets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to Alex for that. Another really interesting presentation. Again, solution-oriented, looking at ways that we can prepare for what's ahead. Also, another wonderful copyright infringement with Sharknado. So that's becoming, I think, maybe the new theme of our conference. So that's great. But before we open up for Q&A, I'd like to give Nate a chance to speak a bit on GM's behalf and some of the capacity challenges that you've seen, and maybe what some of your planning to deal with those have been or are.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, so great presentations by my colleagues up here. I think we share the same concerns. There's a lot of factors against us. If it wasn't Alex talking about the decrease in load factor, or Dave talking about the decrease in velocity, or the increase in the other commodities that they have to move. So at GM specifically, we've beefed up our network design capabilities. So we've said, hey, this is going to be a core competency. We're going to beef this up, and this is going to be something that we're going to strengthen within the organization. Now, in order to build a optimized network, we've got to work very closely with our service providers. So if it's working with the railroads to create a balanced network to capture empties, we've got to work very closely with our railroad partners, and same with the haul-away providers, to say, how can we create backhauls, eliminate empty miles, and so forth. And I think the last point is, we really think collaboration is the next real strength and real pattern that we're going to have to focus on. You know, we compete on a finished vehicle. I would say General Motors' position is we compete on a finished vehicle, but not on a supply chain. So we'll work with our competitors very closely. Again, co-loading or creating backhauls and so forth. And that's really, I think, where we're going to have to focus because, like I said, a lot of factors against us. Weather will come, and we've got to be prepared. And so at GM, we're going to work with our service providers and our partners as well as our competition to you know, create a balanced network.
Okay, thanks for that, Nate. Yeah. Last week, I was speaking with Edgar Pezzo, the executive director of Global Logistics for General Motors, who came to the job last year, and I think he told me that the most difficult thing for him this last year has been the adjustment from the weather after Brazil. So taking some sympathy from Alex there from Mexico too. Obviously, we know all about the challenges, but thank you for that, Nate. We're going to move and open up now to Q&A, so I'm sure there's plenty more we can discuss. I should have been mentioning it, I suppose, earlier, but this is a session that's streamed live, so you can put a question through if you prefer via the stream. I'll also be taking questions from our global audience if there are any. Anybody want to kick us off? That'll be my job then. So the question to Alex and to Dave, actually. So, you know, we kind of addressed a bit about mix of modes and maybe talk about collaboration in the industry. Is there more that the trucking companies and the railroad companies can be doing specifically together? Whether it's, you know, or is this really all on the OEM side to think about having that contingency capacity? Can you guys pick up the phone to each other and sort of in a crisis mode, you know, look to kind of deal with things? Or is that, you know, can you go that far?
Yeah, I think so. And we internally have been debating, you know, how can we collaborate with our railroad partners, you know, in a closer fashion, right? And, you know, for us, really, we're not restrained by tracks, obviously, right? So we can move our assets wherever the congestion or the issues may be. So I think, you know, for us is a lot better. It's a planning and a design method or point to really get and understand where the potential pain points would be and try to get ahead of it, right? Because, you know, as much as we can flex capacity, you know, we just can't throw 500, we can't take 500 trucks, you know, off the fence and staff them and train them and you know, get them up to the standards in 2 seconds. So, you know, my point is more around, you know, designing the network and really understanding where the pain points typically are and trying to address them, you know, in a more comprehensive way.
I would say from our standpoint, one of the things we focus our efforts on, particularly at our facilities, is to increase the communication with the trucking partners so that they understand what's going to be available and unloaded each day. We give 3 or 4 days advance notice of cars that are coming in, and then the night before we will tell them what VINs are there, what VINs are available, and where. And the idea is, obviously, we want to move the vehicles as quickly as possible, and if we can make it easier for our trucking partners to do that, that's in our best interest. And then to Alex's point, I think there is more room for collaboration on a more strategic basis between the OEMs, the rails, and the trucks.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the audience? You're not getting to lunch any sooner by being quiet, I promise you. Dave, you talked about expanding the fleet. You remind me of the number, I think it was 3,300 cars in the next couple of years. How many of those cars are convertible, or are they split between buy-load? Do you have many convertible cars that you're going to be adding to your network?
When you look at our purchases over the last 2 years and then what we're going to buy next year, about 1/3 of the cars are convertible. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing, our strategy at this point is to acquire all of our tri-levels as convertible cars, and the bi-levels will take on as traditional bi-levels. Mm. Okay. You know, and there's different designs out there, and some of them are much more convertible than others. Mm. And that is a big deal because, you know, if you're spending $20,000 to convert a car from a buy to a try, that doesn't add a lot of value.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Maybe, Alex, can you give us any visibility on what fleet developments might be coming for JEP? You mentioned 2,500, obviously you mentioned some idle capacity as well. Are you looking to go into an expanding that, or is it more about modernizing that fleet?
So we derived from the Allied acquisition, you know, we ended up acquiring a lot of assets, right? Right now we have, you know, as I said in my presentation, about a little bit over 2,500 on the road, and we have, you know, certainly idled growth capacity, right? And you know, anywhere between 900 and 1,000 trucks that, you know, would require some a little maintenance to get, you know, back up to speed. But you know, for us, really, that was one of the strategic aspects about acquiring, you know, this asset, is that it had a lot of growth capacity for us. So, but you know, rather than just sort of throwing more rigs to the issue, you know, I'd like to stress more on the supply chain design part, right? You know, because at the end of the day, you want to throw smart capacity to it, not just, you know, moving stuff. Because at the end of the day, I think that just increases the cost to all the players, right? And inefficiencies, product to market speed, and so on. So, you know, right now we have enough capacity to, you know, hold us for some time. But again, we would rather get into it with more of a design approach.
Right, okay. Question in the audience here? If our staff wasn't so fat, he can get there sooner. I can say it, he's my colleague.
Bill Kerrigan from AIAG. This is for Nathan and for Brian. If I heard Nathan correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, could you both answer the question for me if you consider outbound logistics to be a competitive advantage? We've talked about this before. And if so, why? If not, how do you going to measure, other than through reduced costs, a better productivity in your network design?
Yeah, I think from Toyota's perspective, yes, outbound logistics is a competitive advantage. Number one, from a financial standpoint, we've purchased these cars from our manufacturing division, so they're on our books, and they're not making us any money sitting in the snow in a yard. So the faster we can move those vehicles out, get them to a place where we can retail them to a customer, the lower our carrying costs are going to be. So that's a huge advantage if we can do that as well or better than anyone else.
Excuse me, so is the inventory carrying costs on your books and not the manufacturer's books?
No, the inventory carrying cost is on our books. It's on Toyota Motor Sales. So Toyota Motor Sales buys off the vehicle from Toyota Motor Manufacturing, and at that point in time, it's on our books. And so we need to sell it.
So to echo some of those points, for us it's a competitive advantage as well. I mean, we spend a lot of money on outbound logistics at GM. So, you know, the way that we design that network and we pay for it, it's a competitive advantage, like it or not. So, we're like I mentioned in the brief speech, that, you know, building up that capability internally and building an efficient network with our providers, we think will automatically, it'll lead to reducing costs and ultimately getting the product to the customer quicker as well. Because, you know, just like Brian said, it doesn't do us any good to have inventory sitting around the network. And we've got a very, very demanding sales force and dealer network that needs their vehicles today, hot products as well. So we feel, you know, like you said, we got to get the product to the customer quicker and at the right cost. So inventory carrying cost is a factor in every one of our, you know, our business cases that we're running and in the design that we're putting in play.
Okay, thanks. We'll go there, and then we'll come in the front to Ruth.
Hi, I'm, Dick Turney with the Greenbrier Companies, and we're a rail car builder. And I was in this morning's session, and they were talking about, a lot of the panels were talking about contingency plans and putting contingency plans in. And I think it's a necessary evil to have a contingency plan. Louis was trying to drive down what's the value of logistics, and is it just cost? And I think the real value of logistics is getting the product to the dealer on the right time when he needs it. I guess my concern is contingency is a necessary evil, but there's usually a drawback to contingency plans. Either higher costs, or it takes longer, or if you do a contingency plan, it's going to take capacity away from another location. So I guess the question I would have for the panel is, are you looking at more efficiencies rather than contingency? I mean, contingency you have to still do, but how do you build efficiency? And Dave talked about one way to do that is to build into your infrastructure, which is a great way to be more efficient, but it also could be a very costly. I mean, laying down track lines is extremely expensive. So what other things are being done to actually be more efficient and create flexibility into the networks? And I'll end this with, Nissan was talking this morning about they're going to shift the Murano production from Japan over to Canton, Mississippi, which is not a real big deal. I mean, it's not going to add demand. It's not going to increase the vehicle count. However, before you might have Union Pacific loading a load of GM product onto the West Coast, and that empty rail car would load the Murano back to wherever it was going. And that's going to go away. So now you're finding the railroads are being forced, because of the shift of the network, moving empties off the West Coast because of the lack of imports coming in. So how do you address those kind of issues? Thanks.
And so an easy one. Go on.
Well, I mean, from a GM standpoint, I would say, so, it's really working very closely with your service providers. So we know nothing's set in stone. The auto industry changes very quickly. Volume is very quick to change across the network. So we've got to have that open dialogue with our service providers nonstop to understand how their network's flowing and how the movements are working throughout their network. I mean, we know things are going to change. It's just having that open dialogue and understanding how you can offset that, or how you can change your network to build into one of their strengths.
Yeah, I think from Toyota's perspective, we don't think of contingency as a necessary evil. It's a necessary best practice. And it's something that every OEM should be doing, and every supplier should be doing as well. But it's something where, in terms of building efficiency, at the same time we are building contingency plans, we are also constantly doing optimization plans. We have changed our network. We probably made at least 200 changes to our network just since January. And some of those were deviations, but a lot of those were optimization moves. And an example would be, up in the Portland area, we have a Portland port that has a lot of capacity, and we have an Aurelia railhead. And we've just kind of started to rebalance between those two, stayed on the same carrier, so it wasn't moving vehicles off rail onto truck. It was balancing between those two railheads so that we optimized the use of truck in that area, and we reduced total empty miles. So we're looking for opportunities like that all the time. That's essentially what my group does. So I think it's really both. You have to be looking always one eye on optimization, but the other eye always on kind of that worst case scenario of what do we do if? Because our company survived. If somebody had written a screenplay and submitted it to Hollywood and said, we want to do a movie about a tsunami, an earthquake, and a nuclear meltdown all happening on the same day, they would have turned it down as something that would be unbelievable. But it happened to us, it happened to the other Japanese OEMs, and we survived that. So we're all about contingency planning.
Okay, great. We actually had a question on the, Ruud, we'll come to you in a moment. We had a question come in on the live stream. It's actually from a trade consultant in the EU, and it's asking, in the trucking industry, is the trucking industry adapting to using mobile applications for tracking and tracing movement? So obviously I think that's one for you. Alex, maybe you want to talk about the kind of technology you're looking at.
We are. I think we are, right? I think, if you compare it to other supply chain or other trucking companies, for instance, in the packaging sector. I mean, they're certainly ahead of the curve than per se the car hauling industry. But I think the final I think straw that broke the camel's back is having the OEMs just make it as part of the contractual requirements, right? If you really want to move the needle forward, then the customers have to demand it. And for us, it makes total sense. We're I think almost complete in our rollouts of our electronic proof of delivery. So I would say yes, it's progressing forward in a positive fashion.
Right. Okay, great. Did you still want a question, Ruud? We'll have a question right in the front.
Okay, thank you. Ruud Vossenbelt, Inform. I've heard a few things about optimization and supply chain design. One of the interesting subjects, I believe, in supply chain design is also how can you rebalance maybe between transport cost and inventory cost? And the question to the car makers is basically, are you willing to pay more for car transport by truck and take away some volumes from the rail capacity and willing to pay a bit more then for this car transportation so that you can reduce your inventory cost? And question to Jack Cooper, do you have the experience that car makers are willing to do so?
From Toyota's perspective, we absolutely, when we have vehicles sitting for long periods of time, are willing to spend more money on truck versus rail to move those vehicles. That is a very strong contingency for us. We demonstrated that through last winter. I think I know that we probably deviated close to 70,000 units, 75,000 units. So it's something where, very big number, and we did spend a lot of money. But if you also look at what we did in the sales area, that was also very, very strong as well. And we could not have done that without the vehicles. And I think we had absolute great support from our sales senior vice president, who said, you guys are doing the exact right thing by spending more money. We've got to get the product to the customer. So we had great communication and great support from our executives to do exactly what we did last winter.
Yeah, look, I think, the events of this winter and, just the circumstance surrounding the industry, right? Record productions, less assets. We have to use planning and design, as a method to bulletproofing designs, right? So, for us, it's a key element to our going forward. With the number of assets that we have, now we certainly cannot operate, on a manual basis. We have to think, forward and look at our capabilities internally to, present to OEMs a better mousetrap, so to speak. So, at least from Jack Cooper's perspective, definitely worth the investment in that.
From a GM perspective, you can't sell a vehicle that the dealer doesn't have. So, of course, we're going to spend money to protect the dealer and protect the customer. But it's about, you've got to have the full support of your sales staff, your executive management to spend that money. But it's also about putting a contingency plan in place. So we learned a lot last year. So what are we going to do this year to try to put a plan in place to minimize those extra costs and protect the dealer?
Great. I think we had a question over there.
Thank you. Name is Richard Kiley with Norfolk Southern, a member of the one of the 10 railroads that are part of the National Reload Pool. Dave Fleenor, obviously, his railroad is a member of that. Linda Brandel is here from the UP. Brian Eppinger is here today, CSX, and I'm sure others, all members of that group. And we meet constantly to try to improve the efficiency of, excuse me, what is it, 54,000, 55,000 rail car fleet dedicated to this industry. And so there's no lack of focus, no lack of appreciation for this business at each of the railroads. Grew up on a farm, so I'm a little bit suspect of the Farmer's Almanac. I don't look at that weather forecast and give it much credibility. I prefer really, and I think each of the roads here prefer to prepare for contingencies, prepare for what might come. So in that light, the build for rail car capacity is booked all the way through the end of 15. And we are looking at building for 16 now as well. And as far as crews and labor, we're bulking up our numbers by about 15%. I know BN Santa Fe is as well. Linda shared with me this morning that the UP is adding a lot to a capacity to be able to handle what we see as not only an automotive business that's growing, but our overall business. So just in summation here, not a question so much as a statement, is the railroads understand the importance of this business. We are spending literally billions of dollars of capital to support the production of this industry, and will continue to do that going forward.
Okay. Thank you for the comment. Anybody else want to ask a question or chime in? Maybe I have one or two last points. Brian raised in his in his presentation about extending the truck length, not the truck physical length, the drive, a couple 100 miles, is that me? Sorry. Could increase the chance for backhauls and efficiency. I just wondered if anyone else wanted to share their experiences with that from GM. Does that sound familiar to you as well? And then Alex, I mean, is that something you'd encourage, or in fact, are you trying to look in your optimizations of shorter hauls for more efficiency as well? So just to throw that across the panel.
We're trying to create a network that's efficient. So if we can collaborate with our haulaway providers and also with our other OE partners and create a business case that works, then yeah, it's something we're interested in. But we're constantly looking at the network. We're constantly trying to eliminate waste from it, and we think that's a lever. But I think the business case will tell it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, for us, Chris, I mean, we don't look at it that way, right? Short versus long. I mean, to us, it's really about how loaded are our trucks, going to and fro, right? So obviously, at a certain range, the fact that the rail, there's a fuel consumption issue where the railroad can obviously take cargo a lot further with a lot less fuel consumption and labor. But we do agree with Brian's initial statement that there's certainly a radius where before it was deemed to be non-truck competitive. We believe that through network design, backhauls, maybe other elements to asset utilization would really be a good way to complement capacity in an already strained network. So that's our view.
Okay, great. I'm debating, Dave, whether to ask you whether the railroads are going to support the initiative to have longer car carriers, but maybe I won't do that to you. I'm not sure.
I would say we've been very consistent at BNSF about when truckers or industry groups approach us about truck size and weight. And our position is that as long as there is adequate compensation to the additional wear and tear on the highways, we feel that's appropriate. So that's where we are with dry carriers, refrigerated carriers, and auto carriers.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I think that collaborative answer is a good reflection of the panel that we've had up here. We've talked a lot about solutions to the problems that we're facing, not just talk. I think there's some real things happening, real investment side, certainly from the railroads and indeed from truck, and a lot of focus on optimization and efficiencies from the car makers. We're going to get a chance to have lunch now. Please join us. I think it's right across. We'll have a nice lunch, and we'll remain in split streams right afterwards as well. So thanks to the panel for a great discussion. and then enjoy your lunch.